Chapter 1. Say It Ain't So. Cover. Panic at the Disco. Seth. Gabe didn't even wait for the lights to drop before he was off the stage and grabbing Harper as he passed her on the way up to the VIP room. I laughed to myself. It was about time my friend finally admitted to having feelings for the girl. The man had been obsessed with her for as long as I'd known him. I placed my guitar carefully onto the stand beside the stage and stretched, working out the kinks of strained muscles. Dex joined me, handing over a bottle of water, which I took gratefully and drained. "I see our boy wasted no time in hustling Harper upstairs." Luca laughed from behind both of us. I grunted. "Give them 10 minutes. He won't last longer than that. He's been edging himself all night on stage, just knowing she's here watching him." "He's got it bad," Dex said. "He's always had it bad for her. Idiot just wouldn't acknowledge it," Luca retorted. "Hey, Rai. His voice turned flirty. "Did you get any shots of me?" He swung around to greet the blonde girl weaving her way toward us through the crowd, most of whom were being held back by security.
"Every shot of you is sexy, Luca,"
she replied with an impish grin, and he snorted.
"What I didn't get are any sexy shots of Seth. He was too busy being all broody behind the guitar."
Her green eyes stabbed at me. I stared back impassively. She was clearly trying to get some kind of reaction. Therefore, I wasn't going to give her one.
"Yeah,"
she nodded, waving a hand at my face.
"That's the look. Stoic, unimpressed, bored. Are you bored, Lucifer?"
She lifted her camera and snapped a shot of my face. I resisted the urge to snatch the camera from her hands and smash it.
"A smile won't break your face. Come on, Dark Lord. Just a little one,"
she coaxed, her voice rich with laughter. I ignored her by presenting her with my back. I'd seen her around here and there, usually talking to Gabe, but beyond that, I really had no interest in her. "Are you coming upstairs, Rai?" Luca was talking again.
"If you guys don't mind me tagging along, I will. I'd like to get some after-show shots for my blog."
"What did you think? You haven't been on one of our big gigs yet, have you?"
Dex joined the conversation, and I saw him throw his arm over the blonde's shoulder in the mirror above the bar. I found myself grinding my teeth. Other than the obvious eye candy she presented, there was no reason to be interested in her, or what she was saying, and yet I found myself listening for her answer anyway.
"Not yet. It's on my bucket list."
She was smiling. I didn't even need to look at her to know. It was right there in her voice. It gave away every emotion she felt. I refused to ask myself why I knew that.
"What else is on your bucket list?"
Their voices faded as they moved away from the stage, leaving me alone.
"Fucking a rock star? That on your list, Rai?"
I stilled. I was not waiting to hear her answer. I admonished myself.
"Isn't it on everyone's?"
And there it was. I shook my head in disgust. Just another typical wannabe journalist, thinking the best way to get a story is to crawl between the sheets of a rock star's bed. I ignored the way my dick twitched at the thought of having her spread out beneath me. I didn't fuck groupies or journalists, contrary to what people thought. I didn't actually fuck anyone these days. One of the security team waved a hand, catching my eye. He wanted to know if I'd sign a few autographs for the fans still hanging around. At my nod, he opened the barrier and allowed 10 or so fans through. They swarmed over, and I spent the next 10 minutes signing autographs, apologizing for my bandmate's disappearance and posing for photographs. None of my discomfort at being pawed, kissed, and photographed by strangers showed on my face. Carter, my bodyguard, knew exactly how long to leave it before sending them on their way, and we made our way back upstairs to find Dex, Luca, the blonde blogger, I'd already forgotten her name, and Carl waiting outside the VIP room.
"Gabe blocked us out,"
Carl explained, and I rolled my eyes. I rapped on the door. "Come on, asshole, let us in." The door swung open almost immediately, and Gabe was framed in the doorway. Harper hovered behind him, an embarrassed flush turning her cheeks pink. She's gonna have to get over her embarrassment at public displays fast if she's hanging out with Gabe, I mused. We're heading out, Forgotten Legacy's lead singer told everyone. Great gig. Well done. Fantabulous performance. You nailed it. Blah, blah, blah. He waved a hand. Fill in the blanks and all that shit. Seth, call me tomorrow. He grabbed Harper's hand and dragged her toward the door, which led down to the back exit. Carl laughed quietly from behind us.
What? It's good to see him genuinely happy for once,
he said in response to the questioning looks directed at him.
But it means the rest of you are going to have to fill the gap and talk to the press waiting to see you.
Multiple groans sounded, mine included.
No more than an hour, I promise,
Carl said.
They want some photographs, a few sound bites, and then they'll be gone.
We all trooped into the VIP room, grabbed drinks, and minutes later, the press arrived. No more than 10 minutes passed before Carl's cell started ringing. I was talking to Charity Lambert, the woman who had done Gabe's infamous interview, which brought Harper back into his life, and someone we'd been at school with, and happened to glance over at the sound. I was looking directly at him, and was the only one to see his expression when he answered the call. His face paled, and his knuckles whitened with the grip he held on his cell.
Thanks, Shirley. We'll be on our way as fast as we can.
Carl cut the call, and his eyes met mine. Whatever it had been about, the look on Carl's face sent a chill down my spine. I murmured an apology to Charity, put down my glass, and met our manager midway across the room. What's happened?
We need to get everyone out of here without raising suspicion,
Carl told me in a low voice. Tell me what's happened, I repeated. Carl hesitated, then nodded.
Gabe's been in a car accident. He's alive.
He spoke over my curse.
But he's unconscious. They've taken him to Sacred Saints. Shirley, the hospital administrator, called me.
I tensed. What about Harper?
The information is muddled. Shirley seems to think she wasn't with Gabe.
Wasn't with him? What the fuck?
All I can tell you is that Shirley said Harper wasn't in the car when the paramedics arrived, and they had to sedate Gabe because he was freaking out when he realized she wasn't there.
I swung around, catching Luca's eye, and waved him over. We need to get everyone out of here without raising any suspicion, I told him. Why? He glanced at Carl, then back at me. When Carl didn't reply, I quickly explained what had happened. Fuck! He swept his eyes over the room. Okay, all right. I've got this. You two get to the hospital. We'll meet you there. Give me 2 minutes, I told Carl, and ducked into the private bedroom I kept at Damnation, changed out of my stage clothes and into a pair of black sweats and a faded black t-shirt. I pushed my feet into a pair of sneakers, then returned to the VIP room. If we were going to be at the hospital for a while, the leather pants I'd worn on stage wasn't something I wanted to be stuck in. Let's go. We didn't hang around to see what Luca planned to do. It was bound to be loud and splashed across the newspapers in the morning. But I knew it would be effective in keeping everyone distracted from seeing me and Carl leave. Gabe was a mess. There was no other way to describe it. I remember the first time Harper had disappeared from his life. He'd thrown himself into the band, the booze, and the women. Everyone around him thought he was hell-bent on a course of self-destruction. But I knew better. He had been on a course, that much was true, but it was aimed toward fame, fortune, and notoriety. This time was different. He was prepared and willing to tear the world apart to find her. It had taken the three of us and Carl to keep him in his hospital bed long enough to make sure he hadn't been seriously injured. Rumors were flying around about the crash. Had he been drunk? Had he killed the girl he was with? Were they fighting when he lost control? Had the girl died? Had Gabe Mercer died? We, as a band, stayed silent, letting our security team force reporters away when they tried to get into Gabe's hospital room. I wasn't sure how long we could keep the truth quiet. Someone would break. The lure of money in return for a story too much to resist. We just had to hope it wouldn't be someone we'd placed our trust in. Seeing the state Gabe was in made us all feel a little out of our element. and unsure how we could help him. He'd been through a lot of shit. We all had. But Gabe had always carried on with a sarcastic comment and an irrepressible smile. But this was different. He was desperate and scared, and made no attempt to disguise it as anything else. After Dex took my place in the hospital room, I slipped out via a back exit, and Carter drove me back to Damnation. I made my way up to the VIP area, opened a bottle of whiskey, and stood looking down as the last die-hard stragglers were sent home by the club's security. I could have gone home, but Lexi was there, and I needed to be alone, get away from the press, from my sister, and from the constant questions about Gabe and Harper. I knew the staff at Damnation were completely loyal, and I would be able to relax for a few hours until it was time to face the media circus again. And okay, sure, maybe I'd had a little too much to drink. Not being able to help my friend had made me feel helpless. A feeling I didn't like at all. It made me think of Lexi and the mess she'd been in when she finally called me to bring her home. It made me think of my childhood, and I cut off that train of thought. Nope, not going there. I filled my glass and took another swallow, relishing the burn as the whiskey slid down my throat.
Wow, have you drunk that entire bottle tonight?
A vaguely familiar female voice spoke from behind me, and a dainty hand with silver-tipped nails curled around the neck of the bottle I held. We had a brief wrestling match as she tried to take it away from me. Tightening my grip, I spun to regard the blonde-haired intruder. "Who the fuck are you, and how did you get up here?" I demanded. She shrugged.
Ray let me up. He recognized me from the gig last night. I left my camera here and I asked if I could come up and grab it.
Ah, now I recognized her. The shutterbug friend of Gabe's. "He's not supposed to let anyone in here," I snapped, and lifted the bottle above my head out of her reach when she tried to snatch it out of my hand. "Leave the fucking drink alone."
He didn't think anyone was here,
she said, and reached for the bottle again.
"Give me the whiskey, Lucifer. You've had enough. Drinking alone is never a good idea."
"Who the fuck died and made you my keeper?" I bit out and turned back to the bar.
"You're a mean drunk, Seth Hawkins,"
she said softly. "And you're not wanted here, so fuck off."
Well,
I was beginning to hate that word.
I think I prefer silent and moody Lucifer over this asshole.
"Well, boo fucking who? This is the only one you're getting." I strode across the room and emptied the rest of the bottle into my glass, a safe distance away from the annoying blonde.
Are you always like this? I thought you were the one who kept the others in line.
Appearances are deceiving. I sighed heavily. "Get your fucking camera and leave."
You know,
she began slowly, and I heard her footsteps approaching me. I cast a glance up at the ceiling, praying for patience or maybe a lightning bolt. Either would be good at this point.
I thought Gabe didn't want me hanging with you guys because you might try and get me into bed. I should have known it's because you're a complete dick, and he was protecting your reputation.
A good dick is probably exactly what you need. It might dislodge that stick from your ass. I muttered beneath my breath, took a swallow of my drink, and turned to face her. Pursing my lips, I checked her out, blatantly pausing at her tits straining against the forgotten legacy tank top she was wearing. The perfect size, a nice handful. Any more would be a waste in my opinion. My gaze dropped lower to the curve of her ass. Nicely rounded, enough to grip without worrying about breaking her. Sure, I would have done her. Once upon a time. Maybe it'd shut that fucking waspish mouth of hers. Another idea came to me and I smirked at her. Or I could fill that mouth with my dick instead. That was something I still partook in.
Stop looking at me like that.
I arched a brow, rockstar persona firmly in place. Like what? She was cute enough, I acknowledged to myself. Color rose over her cheeks as I continued my perusal. When I finally returned my gaze to her eyes, I let my smirk broaden. Her big green eyes were surrounded by sooty lashes and fine dark brows. I wondered if she was a natural blonde. I guess she wasn't. You're not my usual type, but I could slum it for a few hours, I guess. Finally, I'd said something to silence her. She gaped at me, the color in her cheeks deepening and her green eyes sparked with anger. I faked a yawn, stoking the fire I could see brewing in her eyes. If you're going to hit me, get it done already. It's been a fucking shitty 24 hours, and I want to get some sleep before I have to deal with tomorrow. The expected comeback didn't happen. Instead, the fire in her eyes softened, and she shook her head.
What's wrong, Seth? Did Mommy not cuddle you enough when you were a baby? Is that why you're so nasty to women?
I flinched at the mention of my mother and hid it by taking a large gulp of whiskey. I'm not nasty to all women, sweetheart. Just the ones who intrude on my privacy and then try to lecture me about shit they know nothing about. I nodded toward the door. I keep telling you to leave, yet you're still here. So I have to assume you want something from me? Do you have daddy issues? Didn't he spank your ass enough when you were a kid? She gaped at me again, but rallied fast.
Are you offering me a spank, Lucifer? Because I gotta tell you, I don't think you have what it takes.
You think I can't handle a little thing like you? I took a step toward her, a malicious grin spreading across my face, and she jumped backward. I don't think you're brave enough to find out. Get your camera and go home, little girl. I turned my back on her and grabbed a fresh bottle of whiskey off the bar. The door closed behind me, and I moved across to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the club's main floor. Sure enough, after a couple of minutes, the blonde appeared and walked across the dance floor. She paused to speak to one of the doormen, and I saw her grin at whatever he said before shaking her head. Had he propositioned her? I ignored the small spike of jealousy I felt at the easy banter she shared with him. It was easy to forget that women like her were only after one thing from men like me. The fame and publicity being connected to one of us would bring when they acted like she did. Most of the groupies surrounding the band were openly hungry, almost predatory. But the blonde photographer had a more subtle approach. She was still chatting with the doorman, and I was moving toward the door before I thought about what I was doing. By the time I reached the ground floor, she was gone.
Everything all right, boss?
The doorman, Maverick, queried when I appeared. Fine, I grunted and leaned out the main doors to see where the blonde had gone. A mistake when people outside waiting for cabs saw me. Fuck. Drunken fans was the last thing I needed to deal with. I pulled back inside and stalked past Maverick, disappearing back up into the VIP room and leaving him to deal with the baying horde outside the doors.